Hello and welcome back to Catch and Cook California. I'm Kevin. This is video number 14 in my series, An Introduction to Freediving and Spearfishing California. Today, we're headed out into the interior. We're gonna go freedive spearfishing in a river. Let's go. Now before we get started today, I just want to remind you that I'll be doing a collaboration with the Vision Liveaboard dive boat for 4 days and 4 nights on the California Channel Islands. If you're interested, we've got room for 24 divers to come along. This will be freediving for a wide variety of delicious Southern California seafood, including scallops, lobster, fish, etc. More information in the description. There's a lot of rules and regulations surrounding spearfishing in freshwater. There's a specific season, specific range, and there are very, very strict rules on what species you can pursue. We'll talk all about that in a minute. But one thing to remember, freshwater and saltwater have different densities due to the salinity, the salt content. If you're perfectly weighted in saltwater, you're actually going to be overweighted in freshwater. So you're going to need to take off a couple of pounds. So as I mentioned, freedive spearfishing in freshwater in California is highly regulated, and that's for good reason. The Department of Fish and Wildlife wants us to have access to these opportunities, including hunting predominantly invasive species, but at the same time they want to make sure that we're not going to be negatively impacting species like salmon, trout, and steelhead. So it is up to us to do our homework and know exactly where we can go and exactly when we can go. Common freshwater hazards include snags that may fall down in the river where currents may rip through. They can capsize your boat. And specifically I'm talking about boats here because there are a few areas where you're allowed to spearfish, but you're not legally allowed to access the water through the shoreline. This means that in order to get into some of these spots, you actually have to access it by boat from a boat launch from the nearest adjacent river. For this reason, I highly recommend a kayak. So here I am breathing up on the surface, and you can see this underwater perspective. I'm just going to hold out the spear gun here so you can see how much visibility I have. I've got a full outstretched arm with the outstretched spear gun. You can still see these aquatic weeds on the bottom. I think it's really cool that when you're diving in a river, the underwater environment is so different. It's analogous to the ocean, but it's totally different in its own way. You know, when I drop down on a single breath hold, I'm not cruising along through kelp and I'm not hanging out on reef that's covered with coralline algae and sea stars and sea urchin and all that. Instead, it's down to a sort of muddy, sandy substrate with a freshwater aquatic weed, and usually the structure are fallen trees. When I'm hunting striped bass specifically, I am looking for that structure. So on this first drop, you see me kind of cruising. I'm moving very slowly down the river. This is not me hunting. This is actually me just evaluating the bottom, trying to figure out where I want to hunt. If you want access to these fish, it's best to stay put. So on my first drop here, I'm really just kind of looking around for any kind of structure. At the end of my breath hold, I'll hit the surface. Oh yeah, and occasionally I bump into some fish. That's a little black bass there, a largemouth bass. We're not allowed to spear them. You'll see more of them in a minute. When I hit the surface, I'm going to breathe up. I'm going to try not to splash too much on the surface. I'm really trying not to spook the fish, and I'm looking around on the surface as well to see if there's any indicators of any kind of structure underwater, especially these big fallen trees. Right along the edge of these streams, those big trees are usually old willows and on occasion massive old cottonwoods. That provides a lot of habitat. And just like when you're spearfishing in the ocean, you'll find some fish over the sand, but most of the fish are going to be over structure, like rocky reef. Well, the structure here, like I said, are fallen trees. And when we look over here, we see a black bass. Now these black bass, these largemouth bass and also smallies, we're not allowed to spear them. So it's cool to see them, it's cool to hang out, let these fish kind of get acclimated to your presence, but we're not going to try and spear them. And I know I'm holding my spear gun out here and it kind of looks like I'm trying to line up on this fish. I'm actually lining up on fish behind it. Not that one either. Back in the murk, I just saw my first striped bass. You can see there's a lot of particulate matter that's been kicked up into the water column. That's because I'm laying with my face downstream, and my fins have actually hit the mud a little bit behind me, so now that's kind of floating downstream. So this is me pointing to my eyes. I just saw 2 striped bass. I'm all excited. I didn't even think I was going to see them. So now I'm actually treading water with my long blades. This is something I do. It allows me to keep my face out of the water if I want to have a look around, but not waste too much energy. It's a little bit more efficient than the scissor kick. It also, treading water kind of horizontally using your long blades, allows you to keep from kicking up the sediment on the bottom, so you're not ruining your water quality before you take your breath and drop back down. So here I am making a drop and hanging out on a fallen tree, and you can see a couple more of these black bass cruising in. But at this point, since I've seen the stripers, which is what I'm here to hunt, I'm really not that interested in the little guys. I just want to look around and see if maybe emerging out of that murk there might be another fish. I got excited, so I made that drop a little quicker than I would normally do, and that's why I'm out of breath already. You can see I'm taking my sweet time on the surface, breathing very heavily at first. Eventually I'll catch my breath, throw my snorkel back in, clear my snorkel, put my face in the water, lay flat, breathe up, and then I'll make another drop. So here I've dropped down to the bottom, and in comes another one of these black bass. At this point I decide, you know what, I'm just going to totally relax. I'm going to pay attention to all the cool stuff here. I'm going to really take it easy, try to get very much in the zone, because the last time I did that, that's when these fish came out of the woodwork. And sure enough, I look over, and in the murk, there's 2 stripers. So I line up and get my shot. It's a perfectly placed shot right behind the gill plate, and it comes right out on the other side through the fish's head. You can see that the flopper has deployed, so that is a nice holding shot, and I'm keeping my hand positioned directly between the spear and the fish itself to keep the fish pinned right up against that flopper.
Hell yeah, dude! Woo!
And there you can see the flopper really deployed and that blood coming out of its head. That's because I just brained it, and so the fish has been subdued. It is no longer suffering. I'm going to hold it up against my spear gun that I have marked. My spear gun is marked for different lengths for different species. You can see this was about 22 inches, and just showing that shot again. No meat wasted on this fish at all. I really couldn't be happier. Now these fish can get up to 30 pounds or more, but honestly I was trying to get a fish about this size. Big enough that I knew it was legal size, but at the same time pretty small. And the reason being, I don't want a really big striped bass because they are predatory fish and they are known to have relatively high levels of mercury.
That is something I've been wanting to do for like 8 years. Oh man, what a great time. And nothing but a Craigslist kayak, 300 bucks I think, Malibu 2 by Ocean Kayak. Nothing fancy, but it doesn't need to be. Gets the job done. So if you're on a budget, look at Craigslist. Having a boat changes everything. Look at that, dude. What a beautiful fish. I've never tried to get them with hook and line, so I've never tasted striped bass. I hear it's pretty good. So let's go paddle out of here and give it a taste test.
So 100% I'm totally sold on these boats. You know, they're not foot pedal powered, which is way more efficient, but this is still a super old school design, and we'll talk all about kayaks in future videos. I really plan on dropping some in my introduction to freediving and spearfishing series that shows the advantage of using a kayak to access offshore reef. But in the meantime, all I'm saying is if you can't afford a brand new boat, check out Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, etc. Anyway, I filleted that fish just like I'd fillet any other fish, went to the garden to grab some chives, got everything ready to go, and headed out to one of my favorite outdoor spots to do a little bit of cooking. Once they're cooked, we're going to give them a smash. Gonna fry them till golden brown. Caprese salad. Fresh basil, one of my favorite aromatics. also smells fantastic, and supposedly this is made for fish. Kind of patted in there. Another one from Diane. Thanks, babe. Now that is quite the spread. Well folks, this is my very first time ever trying striped bass. The spread looks and smells incredible, but I'm going with the fish first. Very nice, flaky, white meat. It's like perfectly flaky. Still nice and juicy. That's why I laid it on that bed of onion and covered it over, turned down the heat. That is a very fine eating fish. Wow, yeah, that's great. Good texture. The herb rub that I put on there that Diane got me is amazing. It's like really popping. Some cumin in there. I'm a fan. Striped bass, right on. I go for this potato. We saw this on Instagram. Smash your potatoes and turn them golden brown. And I was like, well, the little creme fraiche or some sour cream if that's what you got, and some chives seemed like a good idea to me. Don't fall. If all you ever eat are russet potatoes, those big ones that you make baked potatoes out of, they're great. But Yukon Gold are way creamier, really delicate texture. You can also find Russian bananas and fingerlings. They'll have similar textures. I definitely recommend branching out and trying some different potato varieties if you're not familiar. Potatoes are very, very versatile. The same goes for tomatoes. If the only tomato you've ever had is a Roma, usually they pick those when they're underripe so that they're easy to stack so that they can transport them to the store. I think this is one of the reasons a lot of people don't like tomatoes, is they don't have good ripe tomatoes and they also don't have good quality tomatoes. So this is an heirloom organic tomato. It is juicy and dripping, sweet, tangy, beautiful, perfectly balanced. This is a quality tomato. With the aromatics there coming from the basil, we got some balsamic, so that nice acid to balance the fat, which is our fresh mozzarella. A little bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt, super simple Italian caprese salad. That's one my mom used to make a lot with tomatoes from the garden, basil from the garden. So it always reminds me of the summertime because that's when we would harvest those things. This is a bomb meal. Yeah, salads get a bad rap, but I feel like if you're doing salad right, you should want to keep circling back to it because it should taste just as good as everything else on the plate. Look how flaky that is. Perfect. Well, there it is, folks. Another catch and cook. This one kind of unique. Freedive spearfishing in fresh water. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. Hopefully you learned some things, and I hope you're continuing to enjoy this ongoing series, an introduction to freediving and spearfishing here in California. I'm going to polish the rest of this off. If you did like this video, please give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. I always love hearing back from you. Share the video with your friends if you think that they would find it interesting. And until next time, keep the old ways alive. Hopefully, I'm drooling.